the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires and a host of damned souls of Paranormal.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm Mark Johnson, and our usual host, Irene Allen, is unable to join us tonight. She's having some computer issues. However, we were able to get one of our stalworthy show hosts from the Paranormal Peep Show. Neil Geddes-Ward is joining us tonight. How you doing, Neil?
Hello, Mark. Thank you for inviting me. Well, it's great to be on. It kind of confuses me what day it is, because I know that I was recording on a certain day and you guys recording on another day, so it kind of throws my head into a bit of a spin, and then I have to kind of think who I'm talking with. It's not Mark, it's not Andy, it's not Irene, and then I think, no, it is Mark. So but then Irene kind of gets muddled up who's she talking to when she's introducing you, so it's not really too different, I guess.
Yeah, well, I tease her all the time because I can do the intro in one breath, where she gets tongue-tied and we have to do a couple of takes, so I like to tease her on that. But hopefully she'll be back with us next week. But, you know, especially wanted you on with your background in ufology, and because we have a very special guest tonight, so I want to get right into it. I want to welcome Thomas Winterton to the program. Now, for any of you who watch the History Channel show, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Thomas is a regular on the show. He is the ranch superintendent, and the new third season is coming out on May the 3rd. So, Thomas, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be with you guys.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, I'm a big fan of the show myself. I've been watching since the beginning, and you know, there's definitely a lot that I'm looking forward to talking to you about the last two seasons and you know, your time on the ranch. So let me start off with that. Now, how long have you actually been working on the ranch?
My first time coming on the ranch was just shortly after Brandon bought it in April of 2016. And it was within a week or two of him purchasing it that Jim Morse brought me out here.
And you know, what are your duties? And this is the one thing when I'm watching the show. I know Jim Morse, he's the ranch manager. You're the ranch superintendent. We have the ranch caretakers. So what are your particular duties as ranch superintendent?
So I'm responsible for everything that takes place on the ranch, meaning I oversee the facilities. So I work with the caretakers and making sure that the facilities are taken care of and maintained. I also oversee the ranching responsibilities, so lining up, making sure that we have cattle on the ranch. We do that to help us keep it grazed down so it doesn't turn into a fire hazard, as well as you've seen on the show, the cows can serve as wonderful biosensors in alerting us to things that are taking place around us. And then, you know, Utah's a dry state. If we want anything to grow here, we have to water it using irrigation systems. So I oversee the irrigation system. Then I oversee and work with the security to make sure that they have the assets that they need, both like surveillance assets as well as, for example, when we got here, and the Bigelow team had security here as well, but they mostly did foot patrols. And 512 acres is a lot of ground to cover for someone who's on foot. And we felt it would be much more efficient and safer and quicker for the security if they were able to get around the ranch on UTVs. So Brandon purchased some UTVs, and I built a road system that goes around the perimeter of the ranch and to some of the key spots so that we can get there quickly. So I work with them to make sure that they have the things they need to be successful at their job. And then on the science side, I work really close with our lead investigator, Eric Bard, and we work together to bring the science assets online. So anytime that we want to add a new scientific instrumentation pack somewhere, whether it be cameras or some type of sensors, it's my job to ensure that we have power and network and any other needed infrastructure in place to allow that to take for that to happen. So I have personally run miles and miles of network lines and power cables, and spent a lot of time building various apparatuses to house surveillance assets. So I oversee all that. Then I also assist. I work with the local governments. When Brandon bought the place, there was a public easement that went right through the middle of it. A Class D road is what we call it here in Utah. And with a Class D road or a public easement, it's illegal to lock it and keep the public out. Now, I tell people, I wish I'd have known that in high school, because in high school, we'd always bring our dates down and jump the gate and sneak in a little ways. And the very thing that I cringe now when people do, and I'm trying to stop. But we'd come down here, and had I known at the time that it was a public easement, I mean, it's illegal to lock it. We would have been within our rights to cut the padlock and drive all the way through the middle of the ranch. And Brandon only had the ranch a short period of time, a few weeks, I believe, or maybe it was a month, I'm not sure, when Uinta County alerted him that this was a public easement and he couldn't be locking the front gate like Bigelow had done for years. Bigelow had kept it locked down, and so Brandon's the type, he doesn't like to play in the gray area when it comes to following the laws and the ordinances. So he reached out to me, and I worked with the local governments to vacate that easement legally and have it deeded back so that we could legally shut down the road and keep people out of the ranch. It's hard to conduct a scientific investigation when you've got the public parading through the middle of your place. It makes it almost impossible to do. So we were grateful that the local governments worked with us to get it shut down. And so I help, I do, the outreach with the local governments and the local law enforcement. Caleb and Bryant really work closely with law enforcement, but I kind of oversee everything as far as all of that goes.
Okay. You're a busy guy. So you've actually, since you admitted you were sneaking on the ranch when you were younger, so you've had a long history of being on the ranch, or at least knowing about the ranch before you started working there. What made Brandon Fugel, of all people, purchase the ranch from Bigelow? I know Bigelow had the ranch for almost 20 years.
Yeah, I've heard Brandon, I've heard him answer that question a couple times. And to be honest with you, I can give you my observation of what I think, but that's something Brandon would have to speak to, really. From my personal observation, I see a lot of these individuals. You look at like Richard Branson or Elon Musk or Robert Bigelow, Brandon. When they achieve a certain level of success in this playing field, from my perspective, it seems like they almost start looking like, what's beyond? I've conquered this world. What else is there? What's out there? And I've heard Brandon say many times, he has a curiosity of answering those fundamental questions. Are we alone in the universe? Is there others out there? What happens to us after this life? The great mysteries. And so I know he's always had a curiosity for that kind of space. And so from my view, that I think that was a lot of it, but that'd be a good question to ask him.
Well, that's the one thing that, and again, when it comes to the show, especially, is I appreciate the fact that somebody has purchased the ranch and is put it in a position, because there's all the rumors about Skinwalker Ranch. There was, the book that came out, The Hunt for the Skinwalker. Colm Kelleher, one of Bigelow's NIDS team members, had wrote the book with George Knapp. And that's what really, I think, put the ranch on the map in the minds of a lot of people on the high strangeness that goes on there. Now, mostly when Bigelow, when he's researching things, he kind of keeps most of it pretty close to the vest. He doesn't really release much. So, which is why I appreciate Brandon's take on it, and the fact that you all are sharing this with the public via the television show. And again, the other part of it that I really appreciate as a researcher myself is the scientific angle that you're taking. That too many shows will go off on some really weird directions, but the tests that you guys are running just fascinate me week after week watching. I'm very impressed with that.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of discussion. We all, our team members, I was thinking the other day, I can't think that there was any of us that didn't come on this place as pretty healthy skeptics. I never personally read any of the books or watched any of the movies, but growing up here, I'd heard a lot of the stories. You couldn't go to the grocery store or to school without hearing the stories of what was going on out here. And so we come on as healthy skeptics. And the first question was, is there even anything happening here? Or is what we inherited, simply a narrative of ghost stories and exaggerated tales? And so that first period of time was really just observational. And, our lead investigator, Eric Bard, he tell you, I'm leading an observational study here. And after a period of time, it became very apparent that indeed there is something strange happening here at Skinwalker Ranch, something that can't quickly be dismissed with the mundane, your typical mundane explanations. And so once we start observing that, yes, indeed, there is something special about Skinwalker Ranch, and there is something going on, or many things going on, maybe not just one thing, but many things happening here that can't easily be explained away. The next discussion came, well, okay, then what do we do with it? We're seeing these things. Do we do as the Bigelow people did and keep it close to our vest? And quite honestly, I can see some valid arguments for that. Or do we share it? And Brandon, by nature, is a very open, transparent person. He's just, when he finds something, he loves to share it. And as the discussion went on and the pros and cons were weighed, Brandon really didn't see a reason to lock it down. Now, there are some things, Eric Bard will say those things that you value, those things that are sacred to you, protect. And so it's that's kind of been the mentality, is want to be transparent. We want to open it up, but it is a value. And so, the discussion then turned to what's the proper way to do that. And, we didn't go out seeking the television show. It came seeking us. And because I was associated with closing this road down, and when Brandon bought this, he didn't want the stigma of this ranch to affect his business endeavors in his real estate world. And so he had no intention of ever sharing that he was the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, and had layered it up pretty good to where, it was, you couldn't find out that he was the owner. And as when we vacated the road, I had to go on public record as a representative of adamantium in vacating it. And so I started fielding almost immediately. I started getting phone calls from all various types of producers and television executives and production companies that were pitching ideas and wanting to do a show, and I would pass them on to Brandon, and he literally had zero interest. He wouldn't even think about it. He'd just say, nope, not interested. And so I would call him back and tell him, that I'd asked and he wasn't interested. And so we eventually, after, we decided that, yes, like, we want to share some of this stuff. And we had one production guy, TJ Allard, one of the producers, and he was pretty smooth. He's really good at what he does, and he called me, and I had just asked Brandon not too long earlier about it, and Brandon said, no, not interested in doing anything TV. And TJ was really good. He's like, well, would you mind if I called you in the future just in case he changed his mind? And he'd been super respectful and polite. And I said, yeah, that's fine. I don't care if you call me in the future. So just like clockwork, the next month he called me and, hey, how you doing? And this went on every month. He just faithful every month, like clockwork. He'd call me, and 3 or 4 months in, now the conversation is, hey, Tom, how's your wife? How'd your son do at his football game? And he's just now he's a friend, and eventually he got passed on to Jim, who then got Brandon to take a meeting, and the rest is kind of history. So we didn't go out seeking the TV deal. It came seeking us.
I remember there was Jeremy Corbell did his documentary before the television show, and I remember Brandon being on the show, and they made it a point to black out his face and alter his voice a bit to conceal his identity, and then of course it comes out later in this show. But still, I like how he was able to put this team together. Now, how long were you and Eric, especially with Eric, doing these types of investigations before the television show started? Was it right away after the ranch was purchased, or did it take a little bit of time?
So the investigation started almost immediately after Brandon purchased it. As far as my role, the whole reason I was brought on was when Jim Morse came out here. It was like the second weekend that Brandon had purchased the ranch. Jim came out here to start figuring out, what exactly they had here, what they need to do with it. And Jim has had such a close relationship with the Native Americans. He's raised hundreds of millions of dollars for American Indian scholarships. And so Brandon had him come out here kind of as a liaison and to see what's going on. And he ended up staying at my motel. My wife and I owned a small luxury boutique hotel here in Roosevelt, and Jim stayed there with us, and we got visiting, and he found out I was a licensed contractor. I built my hotels, and he said, well, would you come out and investigate or do a property inspection for us? And so, I was kind of excited to come onto this mysterious place that the public had been locked out for, the previous couple decades. And so I agreed and said I'd be happy to come out and look at it. And came out here and found that the ranch was actually in a pretty sad state of disrepair. There were a lot of things that were major things that were wrong. And so Brandon contracted with me immediately to start fixing some of these. And so I went to work almost immediately after he purchased it, but not on the science side, just trying to maintain the facilities and bring things back up to par. And then, Eric started really quick into the observation and setting up some observational equipment to start observing. So the investigation happened pretty quick, but it ramped up. It was a very slow, very measured investigation, and Eric and Brandon both agreed that they would be led by the data. And so Brandon didn't just go out and start pouring tons of money into, everything. they started with simple and small, and then kind of expanded out from there. And immediately, because I'm here, and when Eric starts needing cameras or needing this or that, I jumped in and started helping run the power cables and getting the network lines, and it just kind of evolved. It wasn't really something where we sat down and said, "Here's the game plan." It kind of just was a process that organically evolved.
Now, when was or what was your first strange experience on the ranch?
It's a great question. I think the very first experience I had was the first time that I rolled onto the ranch. We went into the ranch house, which is where the caretakers live. And, for those that don't know the history, or those that do know the history, the ranch house is the house that the Sherman family lived in when they were here. And they had all kinds of strange things happening in that house. And so as part of the property inspection, I went in there and started to inspect it. And we got to the back. It's the southeast bedroom in the house. And walked into the bedroom and just, as Travis Taylor says, I got swimmy headed. The room, I started having problems with vertigo and felt like I was going to pass out a little bit. I literally put my back against the wall and kind of slid down to where I was sitting on the floor for a second to catch my bearings. It was a very, peculiar experience, but that was probably my first experience. But, I'm one that if I don't keep my blood sugar up a little bit, I start having those symptoms anyways. And so I didn't think anything of it. I just figured, I should have eaten something, earlier today. And I wrote it off as just low blood sugar. But now looking back and having other experiences here on the ranch, I don't think, it could have been low blood sugar, but I tend to start thinking, well, maybe it was something else. And then from there, the next couple major incidents that happened involved me hearing voices. One time it occurred with my wife sitting right next to me here in the command center. But I had 3 separate incidents, fairly quickly that I heard a voice telling me to leave.
Really? A voice in the house was telling you to get out?
Well, one time it was in the command center. Said, you need to leave now. That was the time that my wife was sitting with me. That particular night, we had a very simple camera system at this point, basic. And we do have good connectivity out here to the internet, and so Eric is able to do a lot of his observation from his home office or from his work office. Doesn't necessarily need to be on site. And he reached out to me on a group thread with Brandon one night. It's around midnight, and said, "Hey, I hate to bother you, but we've got something really fishy happening out there at ranch right now. Like, I've got some cameras that are going down, and the system is acting like it's been hacked." And he asked me if I could run out there really quick and download the data files so he could look at the logs and see what was going on. Being that it was so late, my wife just said, "Hey, I'll come with you." And so I jumped in the car and we raced out here. And as we got to the property, the feeling was bad. It was really ominous. It is a dark, evil feeling. The hair starts standing up on your arms and on the back of your neck. And it was so much so that when we pulled into the ranch house in our car, I left the car running because it just had that feeling like we were going to need to make a quick getaway. And the interesting thing is we parked to the side of the command center on the north side. The cameras that were down that was facing that spot come up. They turn themselves back on. Now, mind you, this wasn't like the whole system failure. This was just a couple of cameras, specific cameras. And the second we pull up, these cameras bring themselves back online. So we go we walk around the front. We come up the front door. This is, this command center is just a modular home that was put here by Bigelow for scientists. And we walk in, and as soon as I shut the front door, my wife screamed because it sounded just like footsteps ran across the room to the right of us, which was the master bedroom in the modulars. It was the room that we called it Bigelow's bedroom because it's where he would stay when he came out here. It's a master bedroom. It's got a little closet and a bathroom on it. And I had my handgun. I pulled my handgun out because it really did sound like somebody was in there. And I cautiously went in there. I looked under the bed, checked all the hiding spots, went in the closet. I go in the bathroom, and the shower curtain is drawn across the tub. And I thought, oh, somebody's sitting there hiding. And I kicked it open with my foot, fully expecting somebody to be hiding in there, and there was nobody there. I'm like, that's really strange. So come and sit down at the computer at the DVR in the living room. And this whole time I'm on a text feed with Brandon and Eric, and we're texting back and forth. Eric's giving me instructions on how to get into the system. He's giving me play-by-play on how to download everything onto this hard drive. And sitting there, got it plugged in, downloading it, and all of a sudden, to the other side, the opposite side of the trailer, back in the other bedroom, sounds like there's a slamming cord against the wall. And jumped up, ran in there, couldn't see anybody there was nothing in the room to make that noise. And it was a calm night. It wasn't like the wind was blowing and something could be slapping outside. It was calm. So starting to get a little unnerved, I go back and sit down at the computer. My wife is sitting to the right of me. We're sitting there staring at the computer screen, and all of a sudden we hear a male voice that says, "You need to leave now." And her and I looked at each other like, did you just, as a matter of fact, I think if I remember right, she even said out loud, she's like, "Did you hear that?" And I reached forward for the mouse. Here we are. I'm waiting for these stupid logs to download on this hard drive. And as I'm reaching for the mouse to get it to go, I don't know what I was expecting it to do, go faster or something, but the voice repeated itself, "You need to leave now." And the way that it came across, it was just like there was no arguing. My wife and I jumped up. We ran out the door, locked it, got in the car, and we burned out of there. And I threw her my phone and said, "Hey, text Eric and tell him what just happened." And she tells me that my phone's not responding. I take it and I'm trying to get it to respond. And so when we get out to the gate, we stop and we trade. So she's driving now, and I'm trying to get my phone to respond to me, and it won't even do a hard reboot. So I can't even get the stupid thing to shut off. It's just completely frozen. We race out and get out to the main highway, and we head up towards Highway 40. And as we're approaching Fort Duchesne, the grocery store and the bowling alley there in the middle of Fort Duchesne, my phone starts it just goes back to as if nothing happened. It starts responding. And so there was a time period of, I think it was 13 minutes from the time that the last text was sent or received from Eric and Brandon to when my phone regained again. So that was a scary time of hearing voices. The other two times happened out there in the triangle, which if you've followed the show, you'll see that there's a lot of strange things happening in that triangle. And so I had two different occasions, one in the summertime when I was out helping, trying to chase down a trespasser, and I was in my vehicle by myself, rolled down into the triangle there, and heard a voice say, "You need to turn around, don't go any farther," something along those lines. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I grew up very religious. I grew up being a firm believer in the Holy Ghost. The spirit that can guide you when you're in danger. So I kind of chalked it off to that and didn't think much about it. And then 6 months later, when I'm out there plowing snow, and this is about 2:30 in the morning. All these have happened. The time that I heard the voice in the vehicle chase the trespasser, that was about 12:30 at night. And we'd had, at the time, we had somebody that was throwing a basketball against the front of the ranch house. And the caretakers at the time, who were, they were elderly, called and were just terrified. And security, I think, was on the other side of the ranch. And I raced out here, and sure enough, I'd been there a couple hours earlier, and the basketball had been sitting in the flower planter right by the front door. And when I got there, the basketball's sitting out in the middle of the front yard, and she said she was just terrified and said that somebody had been sitting there lobbing it against the front of the house. And so immediately started our search for trespassers, and using the infrared. Yeah, I'm in here on the phone. This is Eric. I'm actually calling you from the ranch right now. So, anyways, went out looking for the trespasser, and this was midnight, 12:30, and that's when I heard that voice say, "Don't go any further." Well, 6 months later, I'm plowing snow. And I plowed out the whole driveway from the ranch entrance, all about the half a mile into the ranch house, cleared out the driveways. And then I started up the road across the ranch. And when I got to the triangle, here I am in my skid steer. Now, all the rest of these times, the voice was very audible. I mean, I would have swore that I heard it with my ears. But this night, when I'm in my skid steer, I've got my earbuds in listening to my audiobook. I've been out plowing snow now for several hours. The machine's making a lot of noise. The plow's making a lot of noise. I've got my earbuds in making their noise. I get to that same exact spot that I'd been to earlier with the trespassers, and I heard that same voice, "Stop, don't go any further." And the way that it was working with my skid steer is the blade was about an 8-foot blade, but it took about 4 passes. The snow was so deep, it took about 4 passes to plow the road. So I turned around, thought no big deal. I turned around right there, made my second pass back to the ranch house. I turn around, I'm on my third pass back, and I get to that spot, and I made the conscious decision in my head. I'm like, you know what? Like, you're psyching yourself up. You're making this stuff up. It's not real. And so when I got to that spot, I just kept plowing, kept going. And I probably only made it maybe another 200 feet at the most. And I started to have what I describe as a neurological effect, where I started to shake uncontrollably. And I had a fear come over me, the likes of which I've never experienced in my life, and I've never experienced it since. I mean, it was down to the center of your nerves, and I started shaking uncontrollably. I literally felt like somebody's gonna jump out and eat me right then. It kind of made me think that the best way I can think to describe it is in the Harry Potter books when they're talking about the Dementors, and how it like sucks the hope out of you. Well, that's the way this was. It was absolutely terrifying, and I made my getaway on the skid steer at a whole, whatever it goes, 7 or 10 miles an hour, and got out to the entrance. And I was so terrified that I drove that skid steer right up on my trailer. I had a trailer attached to my truck, and almost overshot the trailer. And wow. I jumped out. I didn't chain it down. I didn't lift the ramps up. I didn't even turn the skid steer off. I was so terrified. I jumped in the truck and I gunned it. My ramps are back there flying. The chains are sparking on the road. The skid steer still got its lights on and running. And I got all the way out to the main highway before I felt safe enough to stop and chain it down and turn it off. Or at least lift my ramps up. I don't think I even chained it down that. I think I just turned it off, lift my ramps up, and I burned it home. And I continued to shake uncontrollably for the next. I didn't stop shaking until the next day around late afternoon is when I finally stopped shaking. So pretty traumatic experience.
And I've heard that happening in something very similar in UFO cases. And Neil, maybe you could talk a little bit about this in your research, where it seems like people's emotions seem to be affected directly when dealing with this type of phenomena, like they're being controlled, like their emotions are being manipulated.
Yeah, there's a kind of phenomenon that some people have alluded to, and it varies sometimes. I mean, they talk about being in like a dream state sometimes, or in I forget the phrase that's coined, a kind of almost like everything's gone peaceful and calm around them, and they're in a kind of their own little blob or bubble of reality, and the rest of the world has kind of died away, and they're just experiencing a UFO phenomenon in that kind of sense. The Oz factor, I think some people refer to that. But it's also noted that, for instance, there's people that get effects, negative effects from electromagnetism, electromagnetic waves, and I understand there's lots of that kind of activity there. One of the questions I wanted to ask Thomas was, does this kind of phenomenon occur on any particular days of the week? There is a reason I would ask that, but I'm just wondering if it's been logged that there seems to be a certain amount of activity, say, on 2 days of the week or 1 day of the week, and it like repeats itself, or does it kind of peak in certain months of a year, or is it kind of just a random haphazard occurrence of things?
The quick answer is it seems to be just a random hazard occurrence of things. Obviously, in our investigation, one of the first things that we're trying to identify is there a pattern to what's taking place? Does it happen when it's warm? Does it happen when it's cold? Full moon, no moon? Like you say, does it happen on Mondays or on Wednesdays? And I don't think that we have come to any noticeable patterns that we can identify as to rhyme or reason when this occurs.
Yeah, a lot of it, and that's something that I heard even under the Bigelow days, the fact that it's so random and would only happen whenever it felt like happening. You could never anticipate when something was going to happen on the ranch. And this is what really intrigues me about the ranch, especially when you're talking about the voices, is, I think most people who have even just a peripheral knowledge of the ranch just associate it with, UFOs and cattle mutilations and that type of phenomenon, not realizing that there is an overlapping of, I call it high strangeness or paranormal phenomenon, what you would associate with some people might think of as being a ghost-like phenomenon, but yet it's happening with UFO-type phenomenon, the high electromagnetic spikes that are recorded on the ranch. And then there's that intelligence that comes through, this voice that reached out to you several times, warning you in an almost malevolent fashion to get out or not go there, or it's trying to intimidate you, to control you in a certain way. I do remember one of Bigelow's researchers, when they were near the second homestead, heard a voice in his head saying, "We are watching you." So it's like, who's watching the watchers? And that's what really intrigues me, is what is this type of intelligence? I'm currently researching, I live in New Jersey, and I'm currently researching several areas around here, especially places I've lived. I've lived in a couple different spots here in northern New Jersey, and I'm right next to New York, and there's Pine Bush, New York, which is part of where the Hudson Valley UFO flap was in the 80s. But there are certain what I call hotspots around here where different activity seems to be happening, everything that seems almost like a ghostly type phenomenon, yet it's not really ghosts. Nobody's ever died in this location. People have seen UFOs. People have seen Bigfoot up here in this area. They call him Big Red Eye, is the local name for him. So it's an overlapping of phenomenon that's very similar to what seems to be happening at the Skinwalker Ranch, but in a much higher concentration. I mentioned before, one of the things I like about the show and what you all do is all the scientific experiments that you're running, especially during when you're filming the show, and all the measurements you're taking, but yet trying to discover if there's something under the ground. You've seen the UAPs in the air, the cow dying, all this strange phenomenon, and yet there's still, what is this intelligence? What are we dealing with? People automatically want to jump to aliens, and I don't want to go. I think that's jumping the gun too much. I think we don't know enough to make that kind of conclusion, because I have personally dealt with different types of what I can call intelligences that I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a ghost. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's an alien. I'm going to sit there and say, I don't know what it is. I just know I've interacted with it and it shows an intelligence.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, I don't think anyone now that's spent any considerable of time here on the ranch leaves the ranch feeling as if there is not some type of intelligence to it. I think we all leave believing that there is definitely an intelligence there. You leave feeling like it's a cat and mouse, and in no way are we the cat. And the alien or the Bigelow people described it as having precognizant. My mind just went blank, but being able to even know what you're going to do before you're doing it. And there's a lot of times when we're doing things, and that's what it feels like. We've seen a lot of UAPs out here. We've seen a lot of strange occurrences in the sky, and I know we have ufologists on with us, and so I mean no disrespect, but my personal opinion, and I know in visiting with Eric, I've heard him echo same sentiments sometimes, is that the UFOs really are not even the most fascinating thing we're seeing out here. When you start dealing with these energies and some of this, what seems to be intelligence that's interfering with equipment, interfering with humans and their physiology, that is, to me, it's way more fascinating and in another area extremely more disturbing. The things in the sky, like maybe, and we can't say that they're not related. I mean, just because we don't see them up there doesn't mean they're not there. And it could be possible that a lot of what we're seeing here is correlated with what's going up in the sky. So you can't say one way or another that they're not. But what we're witnessing here on the ground is it's disturbing and fascinating, all rolled into one.
It's intriguing to me, and fascinating, and I can understand how scary it is, especially when it starts to affect you physically, like it did when you were plowing that day, and then you're hit with some kind of electromagnetic energy that caused you to shake. But I know you sustained the one injury where, and you're going to have to help me a little bit on this one. I'm not much up to speed on what happened to you. Was it like the swelling under the skin? Was it like a type of encephalitis or something? What was the circumstances around that?
Well, part of the strangeness of that injury is that there were not any mitigating factors we could point to that said that's what caused it. It was what caused my doctor so much frustration is, in my week stay at the hospital, they ran literally dozens and dozens of tests to try and identify what was the cause of what was taking place. And to no avail. My doctor would come in after every test result came back from the lab, and he'd shake his head. He'd say, "You're the healthiest sick person I've ever treated." My labs were coming back perfect. And to answer your question, my injury started out at what I thought was, at first thought, it started off as just what felt like a tender bruise on the back of my head on Saturday night. And then by Sunday morning when I woke up, it had raised itself and was like a goose egg. And my wife was concerned about it right then, but I told her that I felt like it was an insect bite. Maybe I'd been bitten by a spider or something, and it was just swelling and reacting. And then the symptoms continued to worsen. Many different symptoms started showing themselves, but the worst one was that from that bump on the back of my head, I had fluid that was pushing its way in, and it was separating the fatty tissue from my skull, and it completely scalped me over the course of the week, to where my scalp was completely detached from my skull. I could grab my hair with my hands and walk my head around my skull. So extremely painful. And my doctor was a military doctor. He'd seen a lot of things in the military, but he had seen things similar to mine, but they were all accompanied by severe head injury, whether it was a gunshot or severe trauma to the head as far as getting hit by something. He'd never seen this happen with no cause assigned to it. And all the way up until the time that I was released from the hospital, they never were able to identify. They were able to rule out spiders and insects. They were able to rule out any trauma. Like they could tell that I didn't get hit by something back there. Through all these dozens of more than 4 dozen tests, they still couldn't identify it.
Wow. Well, I'm glad it finally went away. I mean, I don't know how long you were in the hospital. A week, you said?
Yeah, I was hospitalized for a week, and then they released me. And when they released me, they said, they made me sign papers at the hospital stating that I understood that I had no official diagnosis as far as what had occurred. And because of that, they didn't really know what to tell me to avoid or, they told me to treat it as a severe head trauma. And so my release, my brain's gone blank. So when I was released from the hospital, the instructions were basically to take it easy and rest. And it was quite a few months before I started to feel back to myself again.
One of the things that, especially in the first season of the show, when Bryant, who people know as Dragon from the security on the show, always had a concern about digging on the ranch. And he would say that whenever you all dug on the ranch, bad things would happen. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those incidents were that happened?
Yeah, so it was just, I ask people, how many things have to happen before it's not a coincidence? And so it's not like any major thing. And I want to clarify that I was not digging the moment that my injury happened. The symptoms started showing up on a Saturday night, and I hadn't even been to the ranch that day. I'd actually spent the day in a funeral. And so, now the thing is the investigation rolled on afterwards. The things that happened to me are such that it could take days for the symptoms to start manifesting themselves. So it's still consistent. But as far as digging on the ranch, I mean, I've had a lot of things where, for example, when I was putting in those trails so that we could get the UTVs around the perimeter of the ranch, that was a process that was quite a process. It didn't happen in one day. It was a long period of time that I was working on these trails, and I had my skid steer, and this machine was, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was new. I bought it with like 400 hours on it, which anybody that knows equipment knows that's just nothing. And it was an expensive machine. It worked. I used it extensively in my construction. And things like one day I had to make a pretty deep cut. I'd built a road and had to make a pretty deep cut through the gully to make it a grade that wouldn't tip us over when we were driving down it. And the next day, when I came to the ranch to get my skid steer, the battery was dead. Well, first of all, we have batteries die around here all the time. It's one of the abnormal things that happens here. But the second, dead batteries happen on all our vehicles. So I had a Dodge, a diesel pickup, had 2 batteries in it, and I had heavy duty jumper cables. So I pulled up and I put the cables on the battery and jumped in the skid steer, and there was nothing. And I'll tell you, in the 2 or 3 years of owning the skid steer, I've never, ever not been able to just jump it. There have been times where I forgot to turn the key off and come back the next day and find the battery dead, and throw the cables on there and fire right up. Well, I tried it and it wouldn't go. So I left the truck running. I sat there and revved the motor and kept the truck running, hoping to charge that battery. And after, 5 or 10 minutes, jump out, go try it. Not so much as even a click. So then I go and grab extension cord and I drag out the battery charger. And this is one of those big heavy duty battery chargers. And there's a setting on it. You can crank it over to engine start. And so it's basically giving it all the juice. And I clip my truck chargers on there, so you had both the battery charger and my truck, and let it sit there, and not so much. That battery was drained, and the key was not turned. I didn't leave the key turned on. So that was one incident. There's another. I was down on the south side again, doing some digging, building this trail. I've been in this same exact spot working for about an hour, and there was a tree, like a small Russian olive tree, that was in the way. Put my bucket under it to just rip it out. I'm pushing it out, ripping it, and where this branch came from, I have no idea. Because like I said, I've been working this exact spot for quite a while, and all of a sudden this branch just comes exploding through the back windshield, and it blows glass all the way across me and out the front of the machine. Like a very, very violent explosion of glass. And there's a branch sitting there. I don't know where the branch came from. I've been working there for a while, and this branch sprung out of nowhere, attached to this tree, and it could have been just a perfect hit. Again, that's the thing that drives me crazy about the ranch. So many of these things that happen, it's like, well, you could explain that away, but you get to the point where now you're explaining away 1,000 things, and it starts to sound ridiculous. You sound almost crazier trying to keep it in the logical column than you are if you're just to say, you know what, something strange is going on here.
Yeah, I can imagine, and especially, for as many years as people have been experiencing things on that ranch ever since the Shermans bought it. In fact, well before the Shermans bought it, going back for years and years. Obviously, it just didn't really get the attention of it until, the last couple of decades. With the experiences you've all had and the experiments that you're running on the show, well, let me ask, I know you all shoot the show mostly in the summertime. On average, how long does it take to shoot a season?
So we are, I think the last 2 seasons, like when we filmed season 2 and 3, we're out here between 13, 14 weeks, couple months.
Okay, so that's a good amount of time. The experiments that you've all been running and the experiences that you've had there, especially with using the spectrum analyzer and catching those high frequency blasts that come out of nowhere, it's fascinating. It baffles me, wondering where it's coming from. And the fact that you all triangulated that spot a mile above the ranch is like a focal point. I think for me and for anybody who hasn't seen the show, you can catch the first 2 seasons on Discovery Plus. If you have that subscription, they have the first 2 seasons on there. And then again, the new season starting on History Channel on May the 3rd. But the finale of the 2nd season, when you all went up in the helicopter and started having, the altimeter changing on you and showing that there was something beneath you, even though you couldn't see you. I mean, I understand that that's why they were reluctant to ever fly the helicopter up there, because of all the electronic failures. God knows you don't need a helicopter being 1,000 feet up in the air and then suddenly losing power. So
right.
that's a scary situation.
Yeah, and to speak to that a bit, people that watch the show, a lot of them are saying, "Hey, how come you guys didn't follow up on this?" Or they have explanations, and I have to tell you, we're so grateful for each and every person that chooses to spend their time watching our show. We're grateful for all of our viewers, whether they're skeptical or not skeptical. I identify really well with the skeptics because I was one of them, and I know right where they're coming from. But the one thing that I want the viewers to understand and realize is just like say, we're filming for several months to put this season together. And when you do the math on that, like take season 2 or even season 3, and you've got 10 episodes, and I think they average, if you time them out, I think they're about 43 minutes an episode. So when you start doing the math, you're like, okay, we have 410 minutes of television time. And as you see, they spend some of that time recapping previous episodes or previous experiences. And so that even takes out of it. And then you look at the amount of time that we spend filming, because when we film, I mean, these are long, long days out here. Mm-hmm. There was some days during the seasons where we would film all day and get done late, or in some cases early, like 2-3 in the morning. And then production team goes home or goes back to the hotel, and then we got to be ready. Like our team has to be ready for the experiment coming in the next day. And so we will literally stay up all night preparing and getting ready. And there was times where like we would stay up all night, prepare, get ready. And then I'd go home, shower, change into my new same clothes and come back. And we would do it all over again. And so it's a grind. I mean, we're putting in a lot of film time. And so when you start looking at what the public is seeing on television represents such a small fraction of what was filmed. And this helicopter exercise is a perfect example of that. We're up there doing this experiment, and we're trying to be very meticulous about how we do this, starting at 1,000 feet and going up and working our way up to that magical 5,000 foot mark above the ranch. And as they're starting to get up there toward, they're making the climb up to that spot, and their altimeter starts indicating that there's something 38, 40 feet below them. Cameron started to do some pretty evasive maneuvering, and this is some of the stuff that was not shown on TV. Is he spent some? As a matter of fact, I think there may be one point in the show where it like cuts away and shows the television screen that Dragon and I were looking at down on the porch of the command center, and that was our flight radar, which was keeping track of the flight path, and that's how we were kind of keeping them on track. I think at one point it cuts away. I'll have to go back and look at the show again. The listeners can do that too. I believe it cuts away to the screen, and you see the flight pattern of what Cameron's been doing, where there's like zigzags all over the screen, and those were Cameron trying to do evasive maneuvering, and he would do some evasive maneuvers in the helicopter, and all of a sudden the altimeter would clear out and start working working again, and then a couple seconds later it would go back to showing there's something under there, almost as if he was able to lose whatever it was that was under him for a couple seconds with his evasive maneuvers, and then it would come back underneath. And they did that for a little bit before they called it off. And because of the show and got to keep things moving, and you got so much to show, sometimes we're not able to show the thorough, like just how much went into trying to make that work. And that's a classic example of that.
Yeah, I'm a film and television guy, so I know how much footage is shot and how very little of it winds up on the screen. They have to sift through hours and hours of footage just to make, as you said, a 42-minute episode with a lot of recaps. And coming back from every commercial break, there's a slight recap of what happened in the previous scene. So definitely understand that. with the experiments that you all have been running, a lot of it is dealing with measuring the electromagnetic spectrum and using thermal imaging and all of this equipment. The one thing I haven't really seen, and I'm just curious if anybody has tried it, not necessarily on the show, but I mean in general, is doing audio recordings. And by that I mean like taking audio equipment and putting it in certain locations like the Homestead 2 and letting it record for a while and then playing back those recordings. Because there's something that, we deal with on, in some of our research, it's known as EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, where you'll get like voices, like the voices you heard in your head or you thought you heard in your ears. Sometimes we will pick up voices that we don't even hear audibly, and yet when we play back the recorders, they're there. And there's nobody else around. There's no exterior contamination. And in some cases, sometimes the voices are just random words. You really don't know what they mean. Sometimes they can answer direct questions. And so I'm just curious if anybody has ever tried something like that.
Well, I think it's a fantastic line of thought. And all I will say is stay tuned.
Okay. Okay, that's good to hear because, again, when you're dealing with something intelligent, I know you're doing a lot of measurements and digging and trying to find what's there, but trying to open that line of communication with whatever's there. Now, it may not want to communicate, and at least not in a nice way, but it'd be interesting to see if any dialogue can be made. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward for the new season. Neil, do you have any questions at this point?
Yeah, a few have been building up in my mind as I've been listening. Now, I've just been looking at the website, and they talk about a theory of gilsonite, which, from what I can understand, it's like meteorites, and the whole ranch seems to be slap bang in the middle of a crater of meteorites. Is that being explored further, that theory?
It is. I will say that it's on the radar, and it is definitely something that we are keeping in mind as we set up our experiments. How about that? Okay. I apologize, I can't say more. Just with season 3 coming, I got to make sure that I don't ever give anything away.
Keep it under the tinfoil hat.
You're right.
And with the experiments you're doing, are you finding, for instance, because of the nature of the place, the nature of the beast, dare I say those words, is it affecting any of your research equipment, your technical gear in any way that it shouldn't? For instance, radiation, electromagnetic readings, they're going off the scale, or equipment's failing to work for whatever reason, anything like that?
Oh, that's probably one of the most common occurrences out here. It's the thing that we battle the most, is trying to keep our equipment up. And it's we see everything from one of the most common ones is, of course, batteries going dead almost immediately. I've brought my cell phone on and watched it go from like 90% or even higher than 90% down to 0, shut itself off in under 2 minutes. And I've witnessed that phenomena so many times with the different people. Matter of fact, trying to think, I think it's season 1 when we bring Zach and my mind went blank. We brought them out to do ground penetrating radar, and they show up. And you have to understand, when we bring these people on to do the filming, it's a big deal to be on television, right? I mean, to be able to showcase your company and what you do to an audience of millions of people, that's a big deal. And it's exciting for these companies in some aspects to be able to come out here and get a little exposure for what they do. And they want to be seen in the best light. I mean, the last thing you want to do is get on national television or international television in our case and look like an idiot. And so these teams, they're all professionals. They're vetted, and they come out and they're fully prepared. And so this is a classic case of that. They show up. They had charged their batteries in the hotel room that morning before they came to the ranch to make sure that they would have that everything would run properly. They get to the ranch. They've only been on the ranch a short period of time, 30 minutes, maybe less. And here their batteries are showing that they're empty. And that's happened so many times. Our cameras turning themselves on and off. No explanation as to why. No trail that we can trace as to what made that camera go down. Having meters and instruments either malfunction or function in a way for which they were not programmed or designed. We had a meter that was being carried by an individual that was here on the ranch that started to flash this individual's bank code. This is the 4-digit PIN number that they use in all, according to them, it's a 4-digit code or number that they used for all of their passwords and bank cards. And it starts putting this number up on the screen of this tri-field meter, and it wasn't designed to flash those numbers. So we see our electronics, it's probably the thing we see the most common things misbehaving. I've had radios come on. I could sit here for an hour and start relating to all of the different electronic malfunctions we've had with equipment.
Well, what about Caleb's cell phone on those two different occasions going absolutely crazy like it was being hacked?
Yeah, and that's a case where you've got Caleb's phone, which has been going. My phone has done the same thing on multiple occasions. Travis's phone has misbehaved. We've had other individuals out here who have cell phones that have misbehaved. It's not just Caleb's. Everybody, poor Caleb, he gets a hard time because everybody's like, you got to get rid of that cracked screen. That's what's causing it. And to which my answer is to that is, if all I need to do to bypass Apple's security is crack somebody's screen and it will let me right in, then that's a really poorly designed device. And that's what makes it so incredible is when we're talking about like Caleb's phone, being able to turn itself on, punch in the passcode and bypass the security, get itself right into the phone. Okay. If that's the result of a cracked screen, then Apple's got some major issues. And I can say Apple in his case, because that's what he has. I'm an Android person myself. So I've had HTC out here. I got Samsung now. Like, we've seen all makes and models misbehaving. So it's not specific to a brand, and it's definitely not because of a cracked screen.
Interesting. I mean, there's kind of there's lots of things going around in my head, and one of the other things that I would kind of look at or consider is sunspot activity and solar flares. I'm not saying they would be the total cause of everything, but I'm just wondering, with magnetic fields, the poles of the Earth, that kind of stuff. I mean, I did read somewhere the other day that the poles of the Earth are shifting anyway, which is going to cause some sort of mayhem in our technical gear, as time goes on. But one guy that we spoke to last year suggested that he saw the spirit of his wife in his bedroom appear, and he checked into it, and it was because there was a solar flare that day. And I'm wondering whether things like solar flares, sunspot activity might enhance the goings on of where you are. That's why I wondered if there's any kind of regular kind of timing to the sequence of things. I mean, it might be one of those things you have to measure over every 11 years, which is when sunspot activity occurs more regularly. That's when it gets to a height every 11th year. So it's just something to ponder, I think, rather than just sort of say that's the cause of it. It might be extra things to consider, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that I've heard Eric and Travis visit about the various effects, like, for example, the sunspots. and the way that the astrological activity could be affecting things. So I agree with you. I think it is something to keep an eye on, and I know it's something that they are watching, keeping an eye on it.
Well, and not spoiling anything in season 3, because I know you guys shot that last summer, but, what would you say was the most, because we're getting close to the end of the show here, and I know you're going to have to go here soon. So what would you say was the most recent incident that you've experienced there at the ranch?
That's a great question. This may sound kind of crazy, but you become desensitized, acclimated, used to where there's been times where I've had things pointed out to me that I realized I was oblivious to because they've almost become background noise. As far as I will tell you, I'll give you a teaser for season 3, and I will say people sometimes ask me what's the scariest thing you've seen on the ranch. Well, I shared with you that terrifying experience that I had.
Right.
That was terrifying. I think as far as disturbing, thing that scares me, not that terrified like I'm going to get hurt, but disturbing that's made me lose sleep, was some things that we witnessed while we were filming season 3, and disturbed me on a level that I didn't sleep that night, after witnessing it.
Wow.
And so I would say that we finished filming that late last fall, and we had crazy things happening all the way up to the end. And then I'm trying to think. I've had things happen recently. I'm trying. My brain's trying to go to a specific incident. I have to admit, I'm pulling up a blank right now as far as anything in the last week or two. But things happen. I know the last little bit, our ranch dog here has had some peculiar behavior going on and he's been here the whole 6 years that we've been here. And so I know him really well and know his behaviors. And he's indicated that there's something not right the last couple of weeks.
And that's very important because animals are so sensitive to this type of thing. They're sensitive to things that we don't pick up on. And so when they start behaving unnaturally, between whether it's the dog, whether it's the cows, you'd have to pay attention to it, definitely, because it's an indication that something's not right.
Absolutely. And that's there's been a few times where I was out irrigating and the dogs decided they were done. They were headed back to the house, and I still had more work to do. So I tried to coax them back, and trying to coax them back, they put their hair was standing up on their back and they were on a dead run. And I thought, you know what? If the dog doesn't want to be here, neither do I. So I keep a close eye on the animals.
Very wise. I think very wise. Well, I know we've come to the end of your time with us. So we're talking with Thomas Winterton, the ranch superintendent of the Skinwalker Ranch. And the new season of Secret of the Skinwalker Ranch is premiering on May the 3rd on History Channel here in the U.S. And Thomas, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fascinating discussion. We could have gone a lot longer on this, I could tell you. But I just want to thank you for coming on. It's been a sincere pleasure.
Well, I appreciate the invitation and appreciate you guys and a wonderful discussion that we had.
If you can just stay on for just a second after the show, I just got to tell you something real quick. But I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to another edition of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I also want to thank our guest co-host, Neil Geddes-Ward from the Paranormal Peep Show for coming on today. Thanks a lot, Neil.
No problem. Thank you very much, Mark, and thanks, Thomas. It's been enjoyable and a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we will catch you all next week with another brand new show. So have a good one. We will talk to you soon.